CNBC TV 18 Weekender, only on CNBC TV 18.
Hello and a very warm welcome to the CNBC TV 18 Weekender. I'm Priya Sheth and my guest today is someone who's all of 36 and perhaps the youngest managing director that Kraft Heinz has ever appointed in India. He's a fitness freak, a foodie who loves his cheese, mayonnaise as well as ketchup. My guest today is Sankalp Potbhare, who's the managing director of Kraft Heinz India. Thank you very much for joining us today. January 2018 is when you came on board, a time when the business had been through a rough patch. We'd been 1 year into demonetization, 6 months into GST. How bad was it at Kraft Heinz India at that point?
See, I think all the businesses went through a rough time because I think this was a very, very big intervention that the government planned, and I think we were recovering, and I think the entire industry was recovering to a large extent. For us, this is a period for us where we do our bulk of the business because the category is over indexed during this part of the year. For us, the business started on a very, very good track, and I think YTD May, we follow a calendar cycle. We're trending very, very well, both on top line as well as on bottom line. Our fixed costs are under control. We couldn't have asked for anything better. So from a numbers perspective, we are around 112% of our plan so far, and I think it's going very, very good so far.
So what was the first thought that crossed your mind when you joined? How did you steady the ship at that point in time?
So I think the task was very, very clearly cut out. We wanted to make sure, so we have, if you look at the brands in the portfolio that we have in India, look at Complan, look at Glucon-D, look at Nycil, Ketchup, all these are leading brands, and I think all we wanted to make sure is that we get our act right and continue to focus on the categories that we already operate in, and focus on the core distribution, focus on the back to basics, and I think that's what really helped us. We didn't do anything funny, we didn't go anything after anything very, very ambitious at this point in time, and we just made sure that things, whatever that plans that we planned, chalked out, were executed meticulously, and I think that's what the team achieved delivering.
But if you speak of what's happening on ground, if you look at the wholesale channels, you look at the retail channels, it's been 1 year of GST at this point in time. How are things looking like on ground?
So I think the business is definitely improving across. Okay, if you look at wholesale channel per se, which was got massively impacted, is really showing signs of recovery. The other market which got impacted because of demonetization to an extent was rural. Okay, again that's coming back on track, and for as you know, in entire FMCG industry, rural is anywhere between 35 to 40% of the kind of contribution that it does to the most of the companies, and with that business not doing well, it impacts. Now with the signs of revival seeing and the business stabilizing in rural as well, that's coming back, and I think that's giving us signs that it will continue to keep giving us incremental business. With a good monsoons on the card, that is again further help us drive incremental demand from the rural areas as well. And we are very, very confident and bullish that both rural wholesale channels, which are the two critical channels, which will significantly be contributing incrementality to the entire business.
Volumes is the big number that FMCG companies talk about, and over the last year we've seen volume growth to be anywhere between the low single digits, and now in the last quarter we've seen some revival in terms of volumes. Listed players perhaps have reported volumes which are in higher single digit terms, but for you at Kraft Heinz in India, what is the kind of volume growth that you're seeing on ground? How do you see the volumes picking up going ahead?
So I think we are seeing a very robust volume recovery. Because if you look at, we are lapping a period last year versus last year, that was the time when GST was just getting launched. Okay, so it's not for us, first half of the year we are comparing volume, the next half of the year we'll compare value, because that's how the tax rates will get stabilized. For the first half of the year, the volume growth looks extremely promising for us, and I think we are looking at, we are growing double digits, and I think that's giving us the confidence that it's actually in the right place. As the noise settles down on the tax rate differences, because there was earlier VAT and now there is GST, where the tax rate differential gets over, I think value will also come back on track.
Let's talk about value growth. You said that the second half of the year perhaps will be the time when you will look at value growth. But is pricing power really back with companies at this point?
Yes, to a large extent. If a consumer sees a value in a particular brand or a particular offering, and he sees a value proposition very clearly fitting into the kind of need state that he would want to cater, and I think that's what really will lead to a situation where the pricing premium can be charged. To my mind, I think it will be, if you look at just making the kind of a simple pyramid, a top of the growth, the kind of top line can also get driven by the premiumization opportunity that will be present. At the same time, the affordability and the accessibility, which will continue to tap the bottom rung, which is the rural segments, as well as the bottom of the pyramid. I think these two buckets, and then there is a mass and the core segment in the middle. If you look at these three, I would see very, very clearly a volume growth happening in the second and the third part of the pyramid, and the top one is primarily going to do with the value growth. I think that's how I see the entire landscape from a pricing perspective.
How difficult is it for an MNC like you operating in India to compete with domestic companies on the pricing front? We've seen companies like Patanjali go ahead and offer products at mass pricing. Is that a player that you would compete with? And how do you think pricing perhaps works in this contrast?
So far we have not seen any massive kind of a competition or any kind of a massive interventions from Patanjali when you come to look at the categories as such. To my mind, competition exists across, okay, and I think one should be respectful and mindful of that fact. And I think one has to play to our own strengths. For example, the brands that we have, Complan, we continue to talk about superior nutrition. For Glucon-D, we talk about all-round kind of the kind of energy that is required for an all-round performance. And Nycil is a very, very clearly the kind of the germ protection that, and we are primarily orienting towards our strategy towards our strengths, and I think that's what the primary objective is. Look at the ketchup, look at the other products that we have. I think every single brand and every single offering that we have is primarily oriented towards playing to our own strengths, and as a matter of fact, I think competition will happen and we'll handle it as we move forward on that. But I don't get worried with that, because I think competition will keep making us agile, is what I think.
Talk to us about how aggressive Kraft Heinz is in India, and how bullish are you on the Indian market?
So India is a very, very large market, and I think for every company, I think India gives the kind of enormous potential to grow both from a value as well as from a volume perspective, and we are no different. We are a very, very aggressive company when it comes to looking at expanding ourselves, and I think we have very aggressive plans both from a product portfolio perspective, because I think if you look at Kraft Heinz is the 5th largest food and beverage company in the world, okay, and we have almost 8 brands which are 1 billion plus, and I think we have a lot of plans of making sure that the organization continues to grow, and I think that's what we are primarily focusing on. At the same time, there's a lot of distribution opportunity, and there's a lot of opportunity that exists within the current portfolio. First, we want to make sure that right now we are consolidating our position and consolidating our playing to our strengths in the current portfolio that we are operating. We have very aggressive plans with respect to making sure that we continue to grow both business as well as market share, and that's what we're trying to deliver.
Talking specifically about revenues, I understand that you have a blueprint in terms of revenues for 2021. Run us through what the blueprint is and what the current revenues really stand at.
So I think from a revenue perspective, I cannot share the absolute business that we do. From a growth perspective, we are seeing, as I was telling you, that I think we are ahead of our plans, significantly ahead of our plans, I would say, and I think that's giving us the confidence that we are here to stay and we are in good stead. From a future perspective, we see the future to be very, very bright, because I think the kind of tractions that we see. So, for example, the glucose powders, which is the Glucon-D, where we are clearly a market leader. Okay, the Nycil, the prickly heat powder as a category, we are clearly a market leader, right? So we are clearly seeing opportunity both from a penetration perspective, consumer penetration perspective, at the same time distribution perspective. Let me put some numbers on the table. Powders as a category reaches to around 2.5 million stores, whereas there in the entire FMCG universe is around 10 million stores, whereas snacks, the micro snacks and the macro snacks perspective, it reaches to around 5.5 to 6 million. So I think the opportunity to expand the current portfolio is humongous, and I think that's what we would try to make sure that we focus on that and continue to consolidate our positions and grow forward. As I was telling you earlier, we have very aggressive plans of making sure that the business grows in the next 3 to 5 years time.
So are you sticking to the 3,500 crore revenue target for 2021? This is something that a predecessor had put in place.
I think we have the right foundation, but whether it will be a certain number that you just quoted or some other number, right now at this point in time, right now the primary focus is to make sure that we draw up the right plans, then go after that in terms of delivering it.
But in terms of sticking to this sort of revenue target, do you think you would be able to stick to it, considering that the business has seen a bit of an up and down? I mean, across the industry there's been some sort of challenges owing to GST and demonetization. Despite that, do you think that you could grow as aggressively as planned?
So business will, as you're doing business in any country or in India, let me talk India specific, there will be challenges. The other name for business is about transformation and challenges, right? So one has to keep finding opportunity in every adversity, and I think that's okay, it's fine. I think it will give you a lot of opportunity to grow further. I think India is a very, very large market. Consumers are, the kind of demand that we are seeing from a product perspective. We are seeing a lot of traction in the milk food drink category as well. We are very, very hopeful that we will be able to progress on the plans that we chalk out.
You have two very big brands in your portfolio. Of course, you have Glucon-D as well as Complan, two big brands that you've been looking at growing over the last couple of months. What plans do you have for both these brands?
So Complan, we've recently tied up with Saurav Ganguly, who's a leading icon, and he doesn't need any introduction. Complan primarily talks about superior nutrition, and we are so confident on the product. We are seeing traction both from a market share as well as in business perspective. The consumers are resonating with the kind of plans the kind of messaging that we are going, and I think you cannot expect anything better from the campaign. And I think we are very, very happy that the way it's going at this point in time.
Where do you see these brands maybe 3 to 5 years down the line? Do you see these brands to be perhaps 1,000 crore brands for the company in India?
See, the categories that we operate have a huge flex to grow. For example, the categories that I was talking to you about, powders, glucose powders as a category, the category penetration is between 11 to 12%. So there is so much of headroom available. So India, as I was telling you, is a huge market. So when you see an opportunity in urban, the similar opportunity lies in rural as well. Across pop strata, across income groups, there are multiple opportunities that exist. Glucon-D, take example of Nycil, take example of Complan or Ketchup for that matter. I think it's a huge potential that we see with the kind of power of brands that these brands have. And the numbers that you just said are just numbers, and I think you can continue to aspire even bigger numbers, I would say.
As we speak, GSK has offered Horlicks on sale, and do you think it would make sense for an acquisition in the space? Because of course we clearly know that GSK is not focusing on Horlicks anymore.
No, I do not want to comment on about the strategy of any other company at this point in time. But at this point in time, I would not want to comment on our stand on Horlicks in specific.
Apart from these two brands, you also have other big brands within your portfolio. You've got Heinz Ketchup, you've got Nycil, and as well as a ghee brand under your umbrella. Different products belonging to different categories. Is this a time to consolidate, rethink your portfolio, look at making more additions, or perhaps grow this base?
As I was telling you some time back, the opportunity that exists in both from a portfolio expansion perspective as well as from a sales and distribution perspective as well, and definitely the current core that we have. So that's what we're trying to do. So we are trying to evaluate multiple categories whether we can get into. But as I was telling you earlier as well, which is Kraft Heinz, the primary objective of the organization, the purpose of the organization is to to be the best food company growing a better world. We don't want to get into a product which is what we're not very confident of from a quality as well as from a consumer offering perspective, because for us consumers come first, and therefore we are making sure that whatever products that we or the categories that we want to get into are clearly passing all the quality criteria that we chalk out. And I think that's exactly what we try to aspire for. We have a very stringent quality criteria, and we do not under any circumstances would want to flout that, and therefore right now we're making sure that we're exploring from both perspectives. So portfolio is definitely one area that we're looking at in the future.
There has been news of you pulling out of cheese in the Indian market under the brand Kraft. Is there some truth to that?
To be very honest, as I was telling you, that I think the primary focus of the organization is to focus on the brands that we are, the brands registered, which is Complan, Glucon-D and ISIL. From a priority perspective, every organization has its own priority metrics with respect to where to prioritize and where not. From a pull-out perspective, and I think the primary, it's oriented towards prioritizing on the lead brands that we have. I think that's the strategy that the organization has taken at this point.
And talking about focus, sauces is a big focus for you. You have ketchup and you have mayonnaise, and you've localized them to suit India as well. How big will the sauces at the ketchup pie be for you maybe 3 to 5 years down the line?
So ketchup is around 700 odd crores, and if I add Chinese sauces into it, it will be roughly around 1200 crores as a market. And I think I think it's also very fragmented to a large extent, apart from the tomato ketchup segment. And I think we're trying to make sure that we make significant progress on that. So we have very aggressive plans on ketchup as well. But right now, as I was telling you, the primary focus is to focus on the task that we have taken on at hand on the brands that I just spoke about.
Talk to us about the kind of plans you have for your global products. Will you be bringing more global products into the Indian market?
So if you look at the categories that we operate, I think we have 23-24 categories that we operate overseas, and I think we are the 5th largest food beverage company in the world. So there are multiple categories that we can just simply lift and shift out here. But I think we are trying to first make sure that we are focusing on the task that we have taken up on the brands, the current portfolio. Just trying to make sure that we can grow the current core. We are exploring certain categories. We are in the stage of exploration right now at this point in time. We also want to make sure that we are offering the right value proposition, the right consumer offering to the consumers. And as I was telling you earlier as well, we are a very responsible marketeer as well as an organization, and therefore we don't want to come up with something and then realize no, it didn't work and then pull out. And therefore we want to do our homework right before coming up with any product.
So Planters is a product that everyone's been looking forward to. What's the progress on that, and is this available now in India?
It's available in a very informal channel, but from an organization current perspective, I don't think, because if you go to any store, you'll figure out the product available, but that's predominantly imported. From an India perspective, right now we are not having that in the pipeline, but we are exploring it, whether we can come back with the product in the near future, and shortly you will hear something.
Tell us what kind of advice, what kind of mentorship do you give the young talent? How do you nurture them here?
I think it's very important to have a very clear expectation setting done, because I think the millennials as well as the Gen Zs, which will be walking into the workforce from a couple of years from now, are digital natives, and I think you don't need to tell them about what is to be done. It is orienting them towards, guiding them towards the right purpose. And I think if you keep showing them and keep setting the right expectations, then I think the task could be very clearly be accomplished. At the same time, I think most of the organizations would need to eventually look at the work policies, like flexibility towards work hours, the work from home, location free working, remote access, and all of that. And I think those are some of the things which will continue to keep bothering if we are not flexible and adaptable towards these generation.
Are you a workaholic? What do you do on weekends? How do you balance this whole work and life situation?
See, primarily I try to balance work and life to a large extent, because in order to be effective at work, you need to have the right balances and the other spheres as well. Weekends is what I try to make sure that I spend good time with my family. Okay, I like running, so I try to run, make sure that I try to cover up on the lost days over the weekends, and I think I try to balance it out. I like like listening to music, like traveling, and I think I do a lot of it with my family as well.
Okay, time for a very quick rapid fire. Are you ready?
Yes.
Heinz or Kraft?
Both, I would say, because the portfolio has opportunities in both sides, and I think I'm all for opportunities.
Mayonnaise or cheese, your personal favorite?
My personal favorite would be cheese.
What warning would you like to give competitors?
I think I don't want to give any warnings. I think they are there to play their game. We are here to play our games. So I think we'll stick to our basics.
If not a CEO, then?
Travel blog writer, I would, for sure, without any doubt.
Traveler or foodie?
Oh, you've asked of the foodie.
A run by the beach or trek up the mountain?
Run by the beach.
Alright, you performed very well on our rapid fire. Thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you so much for inviting us over to your office. With that, it's a wrap on this very special show. Thank you so much for watching.
CNBC TV 18 Weekender, only on CNBC TV 18.